Hello there, it's 3 o'clock on a Tuesday, and we all know what that means, behind breaking bond. Thank you so much for joining us. You're obviously here because you care about the current situation that we're seeing in our city with high crime rate and the revolving door at the courthouse. Andy Kahn is not here today, he's MIA. If he met foul play, I just want to say I have an airtight alibi. Don't I, Sydney?
Yeah.
I was with Sydney, that's where I was.
We were together. We're always on the same side.
Introduce yourself, Sydney.
Hi, I'm Sydney Zeiker. I'm the director of our Safe Community Institute at Crime Stoppers. So I get to work in the office next to Andy.
And that must be thrilling.
Oh, it's a party. They stuck us way down at the end of the hall so that we can't bother everyone else because we just yell at each other all day long.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
One of the things, first, Joshua, introduce yourself, young man.
Good afternoon, Joshua Webb. I'm programs coordinator here at Crime Stoppers. I get to work with our Safe School and Safe Community Institutes.
One of the things we want to start with today is, if you'll recall, last week was when they had the vote at Commissioner's Court, the bail bond board, making it a minimum that the amount that you had to post for a bond had to be 10% of the bond amount. Raises a lot of questions, doesn't it?
It does. For me, the first thing I think of is what we've been saying here. Why 10%? I mean, I know that it's what most people have done historically, but I mean, is there any data or research about why 10%? Is that a magic number for some reason? The next thing is, I mean, who's going to monitor this system? We can't even monitor people who are violating their bonds currently. So who's monitoring whether a bail bondsman requires 10% minimum or not? And what happens when and if they don't require that?
In a lot of ways, I think it was sort of, not that it wasn't a good thing, but in a lot of ways, I think it's sort of trying to divert, right? I mean, it's sort of, that became this big pushed of, well, some people are only posting 2, 3, 4, 5%. And in a way, I feel like the judges sort of pushed it off on bail bonding. Well, I didn't know that. I thought everybody had to post 10%.
Definitely. I think that as what I've seen in the community and in my work is that people are trying to look at one singular issue. So for the judges and for this voting board, right now, that's the singular issue. The singular issue that they're saying is, very few of our bail bondsmen are requiring less than 10%. However, we're forgetting about our repeat defendants. We're forgetting about our case backlog. We're forgetting about increase in violence generally across.
There's so many issues involved in it. And yeah, one of the big problems has got to be the backlog at the courthouse, because first Harvey hit. Mm-hmm. Then we have the pandemic. That's a big problem that needs to be taken care of, definitely.
Absolutely. There's kind of multiple things going on with our case backlog. Of course, we had Harvey. Of course, we had COVID, but also our population has increased since we added a judge. We just added our first additional criminal court judge temporarily in many years. And also, our criminal courts last year saw less than a quarter of what they typically see in a year. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Also, when we look a little bit further into those numbers, we found that there are some courts that are up and running almost as close to normal as pre-COVID. And there's some courts that saw no cases last year.
Yeah.
So as we continue to track that throughout the year, which is one of our main components of our new research center, which is called the Glenda Gordy Research Center, is looking at that and correlating it with what is going on in our community. Because, I mean, you can look at the statistics.
Right.
The longer someone sits in pretrial, the more likely they are to reoffend.
Well, and we pointed out many times, being out on bond, the whole way that it's structured, it's a temporary thing. Right? I mean, the longest anyone theoretically should be out on bond would be a year. We're talking about people that are out on multiple bonds going on 3-4 years.
I was in a meeting a couple weeks ago talking about some of our murder and even capital murder cases that we have that have been sitting for 5+ years in pretrial. I mean, we have people on capital murder charges who are just awaiting trial. They haven't seen trial. Nothing's happened with their case in 5, 6, however many years, what is compelling them to come back?
Well, and you've got to wonder when the day comes, hey, today's judgment day, we're going to have your trial. How many of those people are going to show up?
How many of them still live around here?
Right.
How many of them are going to show up? And if they don't show up, what are we doing about that? Last time I checked, we had 600 plus murders just roaming our streets. And I mean, it's been a couple months since I've checked on that, but
and you know that number has
staggering.
grown.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, with this simple amount.
Then you also have to wonder, okay, if you're putting all of these people, they're working 14-hour days, how good are they going to be? Or how are you going to have to question the cases later on? What if you're the defendant and it's like, well, they were doing court 18 hours a day and I'm questioning, my attorney's ability or the state or the judge, right? I mean, people need to rest. You can't expect people to just work around the clock to try to get these cases.
But that poses another question. I mean, we as a county have to decide, is it most important to have high quality prosecutors, enough prosecutors to get through this backlog? Are we willing to pay for that? Because I mean, think about it. If someone is making $80,000 as in this role, and they can go work privately and make, multiple $100,000, how long are they going to stay here? And how long are they going to be devoted to giving their all in these really complex cases?
Right.
I mean, criminal cases are not simple.
Right.
And so we want all of the components of our system to be working at their tip-top shape. And I believe that requires good payment, showing that, we believe in this. And as a community, we're saying, yes, we're thankful for the work that you're doing and let's support you in doing that work.
Yeah, and you can't expect somebody to be a workhorse. You can't work until they're, drive them into the ground. Another thing we were talking about before you all joined us was younger folks like these two. What do you find when you're talking to friends and people your own age? I mean, how much of their criminal justice system do they really understand?
It's funny. I've had a couple different friends recently become citizens, and them talking about their citizenship test and kind of quizzing us, those of us who are native citizens, about basics of our criminal justice system is shocking and really scary to me. Of course, this is what I do. This is what I have devoted my life's work to, my education to. But that is a full-time job in figuring that out. My friends who are, teachers and engineers and nurses, and I mean, your girlfriend is an ER doctor. Like, that's not what they're spending their life doing, and they have no idea the intricacies. I mean, things like jail versus prison.
Yeah.
What is that? I mean, even my sweet husband is like, what do you mean jail versus
a lot of
prison?
people think it's the same thing, right? You're locked up. What's the difference between, and of course jail is a temporary thing. And when you're convicted of a crime, that's when you would go to prison. And there are people too that they're not real clear on the difference between probation and parole.
Right. And I think that's what makes the issue that much more complicated. Is people just aren't on the same page to begin with. There is a lot of confusion about what these terms, even when we say felony bond reform, misdemeanor bond reform, depending on who you talk to, that can mean completely different things. And so it's crucial that we all first get on the same page. What do we mean when we say these words? That's why I love that we have our civics presentation that we have been developing, to make sure that we all know what we're talking about when we talk about these issues, so we can effectively and appropriately address them.
And there's confusion even when you look at the revolving door at the courthouse. There will be people, that's the DA's fault. No, the DA has nothing to do with it. Well, that's the mayor's fault. No, the mayor doesn't have anything to do with it.
I mean, even simpler to that, in that we have city leaders versus county leaders. Like, people still do not understand that divide. And even amongst my friend group that I'm sure are just so tired of me talking about crime nonstop, I feel like they're just finally realizing, oh, county judge like doesn't work for the city.
Right, yeah.
Even though she's the one who's kind of been very outspoken about a lot of things. So educating on that and even seeing the need for that is really why we've created a whole educational center via our research center. So the vision behind our research center was to create basically a data analytics dashboard where you can come, you can track crime trends, it's interactive, it's a simple way for people to look at crimes in their specific neighborhood and kind of see the trajectory of them over time. And then also to help inform our public safety programming. But as I dug into that, I realized, people aren't even going to know how to engage with this dashboard because they don't understand the terms.
Right.
They don't understand the charges. They don't understand the difference in pretrial and sentence. They don't understand a difference in a criminal court judge and a civil court judge.
Right.
And so we actually have partnered with an attorney to take all of these terms that we're talking about, put them in plain language in a searchable form, and then also to kind of create a history of crime, both generally in America and how we've had crime spikes and what has contributed to that and what has contributed to incarceration rates and all of that, all the way down to how we've arrived at this point in Harris County. And through those, you can read, right now she just sent me one all the way back about prohibition. And
that's fascinating.
Prohibition, really was the first time that we saw organized crime through gangs.
Yeah.
And a lot of different arguments for and against. So we tried really hard to stay very neutral and give a lot of factual information from all sides of the argument, so that people can go and use this as a community resource. So it's quite the endeavor, but I think that it will be really helpful kind of bringing in some of those civics pieces that we've worked on for several years. We have animation. So we're working to combat this problem in ways that all generations of people will be interested in.
And I think no matter what your age is, and of course, the majority of people, you're not going to be in the court system or the criminal element. And so, you're not forced to learn, or you don't have to know this, but it's really good to understand because we all get to vote. We all have a voice in the community that we live in. And right now, I think we can all agree one of the main things on most people's mind is crime. It's gotten totally out of control. I feel so, it hasn't happened to me, knock on wood, but I feel so sorry for somebody that gets up and they go out to their vehicle and their catalytic converter's gone. I mean, imagine what a hassle, not only is it an expense, it's a hassle to fix. It's just, who wants to go through something like that?
This is a very silly example, but we were gone this weekend and my neighbors were watching my house and I had a package delivered and have, gated house, all the things. And I got home and I was like, hey, do you have my package? And they're like, yeah, we put it right there by your door.
So
someone had stolen it and come over our fence. And then you think through, and I was explaining to them, hey, I know that this is just a package and I know that we could get that package back or we can buy another one or whatever, but that means that person came over our locked fence and was right by our doorstep. That means that we're one step away from an intrusion, and then what do you do?
Yeah.
That could become violent in an instant.
And I never understood that whole taking stuff off the porch. Number one, you don't even know what it is.
Box of diapers,
It's something that you might not even be able to use, or it's totally worthless to you. And just about everybody has a ring cam.
Right.
Yep.
So it's on my next door the other day, you see this woman just walking up to somebody's porch and they had a pot of flowers and she just picks them up. You can see her as clear as day.
And it's as an organization that is in the community educating honestly millions of people every year, it's such a hard balance of how do you educate on these things without creating fear? How do you empower people with this information? That's really the core of what we do. We talk about, hey, these are some steps that you could take if you're going out of town while you're traveling, if you notice someone with your ring, but it still requires our community members taking action.
Yeah. And none of us, we don't want to live in a society where you're afraid all the time. No one should walk around in constant fear.
Absolutely.
That's not the way anybody should have to live or want to live. But sometimes you're right, just a little bit of knowledge can prevent some things from happening.
And it can prevent a potentially violent situation.
Right.
Mhm.
Yes. Yes. Anybody got any questions over there?
We have a comment.
Okay.
Facebooker Andy says,
Is it any gone?
"We are so grateful Sydney has taken Andy's place. How can we make sure this is permanent?"
Just keep sending those comments.
I
in.
agree with that.
And this same Andy K says, "Did Sydney learn to talk with her hands from Andy?"
No, because I don't go like this, like Andy does. And I'm really worried about becoming Andy because I really like to keep my hair.
What are you trying to say?
Maybe you'll become Andy.
You will never become Andy City. You will never become Andy. We miss you, Andy.
We do miss you. See you next week, Andy.
Tell us a little bit what you do.
Yes, sir. So I get to go into schools and talk about, number one, our tip line. Talk about how students can keep themselves safe, keep their fellow classmates safe, keep their campuses safe. There's a lot of threats on a school campus. And it's not just, and not to say just, but it's more than people bringing weapons to campus. Having a cell phone in your pocket, having access to the internet 24/7 opens up young people to so many threats, so many different ways to be harmed. And I get to go in and talk to students, parents, teachers about ways to keep ourselves safe on the internet. We have all spent so much more time on Zoom, on Facebook these last few years.
Yeah.
And everything from Zoom bombing to spam emails, like we are seeing so much of that. And so there are things that we have to do. Again, it's about balancing ignorance with like fear and paranoia. We have to educate people, but not to the point where we're walking around scared every day. But there are things that we must do to keep ourselves safe. So I get to talk about that. I get to go to safety fairs in the community to share our public safety tips, our child ID kits that we get to make. I was actually just a guest on our podcast this morning, which has been a lot of fun.
Check it out tomorrow.
Yeah. and just share information with people. When I started with Crime Stoppers last year, I really wanted to make sure that this is an organization I can commit to. And it is. It absolutely is. I wanted to make sure, for example, like we were on the right side of the bond reform issue, which I think we are.
Yeah.
And so being able to become a part of the institution that is Crime Stoppers of Houston has been really rewarding. And I look forward to doing it more.
You know, something that happened with Joshua, like shortly after he started, you've been here almost a year, is he came into my office and said, "Can I close the door?" I said, "Sure." He closed the door and he's like, "Can you explain all of this bond stuff to me? Because a lot of talk in the community is that bond reform is good." And I said, "Yeah, misdemeanor bond reform is good."
Definitely.
Absolutely.
No one wants to see someone with a misdemeanor, a theft, or some misdemeanor crime set in jail. That's wrong. That should not happen. And again, I mean, there's a federal judge is what led to misdemeanor bond reform here in Harris County. And since we've all been talking about it, we've all been on the same page that it's a very good thing. There is no actual mandated felony bond reform. There's not been a federal judge that told the current judges down there, you have to let people out on multiple felony bonds. Everyone deserves a bond. There's no doubt about it. That's what the state constitution says, and that's what should happen. What we've been talking about is someone that is repeatedly given a bond. They pick up another criminal charge, violent criminal charge. It's like they're allowed to continue on their crime spree while out on bond. That's the issue. That's the problem. That's what needs to stop.
But, you know, I loved all of his questions because it gave me such insight as to like what our generation of people think and what questions they have, and has really helped. A lot of the things that you will bring to me are things that help inform our programming and help inform our education so that we can answer those questions. We want younger people to be engaged in this. I think a lot of times we're coming to this point in our lives where it's like, oh, this is our community. Like,
Yeah.
this isn't just our parents' community anymore. This is
It's
our
where you're
community.
gonna live, raise your kids, yes. And to be perfectly honest with you, when Andy first brought it to my attention in like late 2018, 2019, I was not understanding it. You know, he would say, well, they were out on 3 months. How can that be? If you pick up a criminal charge, you violated your.
You're done.
Right, and
Right.
that's the way that it was. And in the past, there were times when, and I'm sure there are circumstances where maybe 2 bonds would be appropriate. But then, I mean, we've seen people out on bond for murder and allegedly kill someone else. That is not, I don't see how anybody can say that's okay.
One of our Facebook viewers says actions, especially violent actions, should always have consequences.
Of course, yes, of course. And that's where the problem, I think, we see with the situation with the courthouse, because you've got these young defendants that they know, well, I'll get out tomorrow, I'll post a bond, I'll be out again. They don't see the consequence. And I think that's, and I'm not trying to speak for judges, but I'm sure that some of them, and I get this, they're looking at these young, primarily men, thinking we need to pull them out of this, we need to get them out of the system. We need to get them on the right path. And yes, there are defendants that you can do that with. But if you're letting them out and they're committing more crimes and they're looking at 4, 5, 6, even 8 felony criminal charges, you didn't do them a favor. You just put them in a big hole that they're not going to be able to get out of.
Well, to me, removing them from the system and then seeing them reoffend means that our system is failing. It means that we are not rehabilitating in the way that we absolutely need to. I mean, there are systems that have worked.
Yeah.
There are risk assessments that have pretty good outcomes. Actually, I was talking to one of my professors who has studied risk assessments for violent offenders for years and years, and he was just absolutely floored that we have people who are, have a charge of murder and then have another one and have another one, and kept just jaw on the floor asking me and clarifying again and again. And I was like, this is what is happening here. And he said, well, why aren't you using risk assessment?
Well, you look at the federal system, right? It's not money at all. That it's basically, they're looking at are you a flight risk? Can we feel very confident you are going to come back to court? What's your criminal history like? Do we think you're going to go out and hurt somebody? Because the most important decision anybody makes in the process is public safety. And that's what everybody needs to look at. That's what prosecutors look at. That's what police officers look at. And that's what judges should be looking at. What's the risk to the public if I continuously let this person out? When I look on paper, and again, okay, I get it, they're not convicted yet. But how many times are you going to falsely be accused of aggravated robbery?
Right.
And I think a question we have to ask ourselves as a community, who are we prioritizing? Of course, we need to make sure that anybody accused of a crime has protections in place. But at what point do we begin to prioritize the alleged offender over a victim who has had very real harm?
Yes, yeah.
Why do we not elevate these people who have been harmed and make sure that they're safe, make sure that the community is safe?
This might be very naive of me, but I've always felt this way. I feel that the majority of people in our society, 90%, are good people. You have a segment of people that they're not good people. They're violent, they're mean, they're cruel, they want to live in the criminal element. And those are the people that we need to focus on and keep them incarcerated or do something with them.
I'm going to take it a step further. We need to figure out why.
Yeah.
Why?
Yes.
Is it poverty? Is it mental illness? Is it whatever? And there's tons and tons of research and data out there, but I don't feel like we're utilizing the resources that are at our fingertips to look at those and to really create safeguards for a lot of those situations. We're seeing, increase in violence, but why?
Right.
We're seeing, you know, violence in specific neighborhoods or specific pockets of our community. But why? And if we can help create safeguards there and help provide resources, which is what my team is so passionate about, and Joshua does a really great job of being innovative with that, then maybe we can see on a slower, longer term scale reduction. But I don't believe that there's a quick fix. And I think that
No,
our
there's
society
not.
wants that so bad.
Yeah, and there's no doubt there are people that can be rehabilitated. There are people that their crimes are drug fueled. And yeah, you get those people off of drugs and you get them go down a different path. There are people that do that every day, and you know, God bless them. But then there are other people that I never will forget. I had a friend many years ago that had a serious drug problem and was in and out of prison. Got a great job, got all cleaned up, and I'm thinking, wow, you know, look at you. Well, he just spirals out of control. And I'm like, what happened? And he looked at me and he said, I don't want to live this going to work every day, mundane life. That's boring to me. Well, that's life. I mean, you know, there are people that they don't want that. They don't want the 9 to 5 and they have to have some sort of excitement or something going on.
Or even the structure that's provided within our prison system.
Right.
I mean, I think that there's a lot of reform that needs to happen of our prison system, but I can remember times when we've taken our team to tour the juvenile facilities here and kind of talking with the facilities there and the employees there about how they'll see repeat juveniles who come back and say, well, at least here I'm in a room by myself and I can close my eyes and know that I'm safe at home. Like, and what does that say about our community as well?
Yeah.
And
well, and there are people you can't, I mean, I hate to say it, but you can't lead them to their own devices. It's almost like they want that structure. They want to have no choice at all. You know, I'm going to tell you what you're going to eat today. I'm going to tell you when you're going to go to sleep, and I'm going to have. And there are some people that they almost need that, because if you say, okay, what do you want? They're off the rails, right?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Facebook viewer Annette says, the only one suffering here are the families of the victims. Justice for Lily.
That is so true. I can't, you know, I'm the first person to say that the only way you would know what it would be like to lose a child is to lose a child. You don't know that feeling until that's ever happened. And I think that's the worst thing that anybody should ever have to go through, because that's not the cycle of life. We bury our parents. Our parents don't bury their children. And it's a hurt that you know you're never going to get over. And yeah, I mean, it's just, it's heartbreaking. You guys, Andy, I mean, when you talk to these people, it's just, I've interviewed people before that I sit there and I'll look at them and I think, how are you even doing this? Because I don't think I could. I mean, I don't think I could get up and put one foot in front of the other and just go on. I mean, it would just be too difficult.
And how do we turn a blind eye to that? Like, I can't stomach that. Like, I can't walk away from a victim that I'm talking to in whatever setting. So I just cannot fathom having someone speaking to me and discounting their story or telling them, you know, this is a non-issue, or the people who could possibly be wrongfully accused are far more important than you. No, they're not. You as a victim are important. Of course, we don't want people wrongfully convicted. I have a dear friend who was wrongfully convicted for years. But at the same time, you have to look at this family and the brokenness, the heartache that's occurred here, and we have to respond to that. So I'm so proud that that's what we spend most of our time doing at Crime Stoppers.
Well, and you look at people that, you know, you would hate to have a child that's incarcerated, but your child is alive. You could go see your child, where if your child killed someone, their family, they don't have that option. It just doesn't happen anymore. Hey, thank you all so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. You can catch this on our YouTube channel as well. And be sure to watch a riveting episode of Breaking Bond tonight at 9. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.